Now, a few people have asked me could I do videos on favourite gas masks and things like that. I've already done a video on my favourite gas mask, which is the Avon CT12. Some people prefer the FM12, personally I prefer the CT12, I've got both. But I thought I'd do a video on some of the other masks I like, because I've been asked in various different forms, can I do more favourite gas mask videos? And right off the bat I'll say that the ShMS is definitely on this list, but I've not included it in the video, just because I simply talked about it the other day and I don't want to bore people who maybe aren't that interested in the mask by, you know, featuring it several times in a row. So, let's start off in no particular order. This isn't like a top 5 kind of thing, it's just, you know, ones I randomly picked out I really like. So there's other masks that, you know, could be on this list that I've sort of not bothered including, because I thought it'd be more interesting to talk about some of the masks as well. Israeli Shalon 4A1 civilian mask. The M15 is technically a better mask than this, but I kind of admire this mask for being cheap to mass produce, being a one-size-fits-all design. You simply, you know, get the straps loose, put your face into the chin section, tighten the straps, and you have a fully functioning gas mask. It's got a small voice diaphragm on it that's nice. Another good feature about this mask is it can take both Warsaw packed and NATO filters. All in all, a very good cheap mask to be a mass-produced civilian one. So, thumbs up for this mask. It's an excellent, you know, cheap and cheerful civilian mask that does all the things needed of a civilian mask. Next we have the BEM or BEM 4GP. People often know this as a riot mask, except it's not. It's basically because they got rid of them out the army fairly quickly after introducing them in Belgium, and then they kind of just used it as a riot mask before selling them as surplus. So visually it's quite similar to a lot of other masks. If you're familiar with Israeli M15s, or, you know, German M65 kind of designs, it's very similar to that. What you have here is a mask with an oral nasal cup and a voice diaphragm in that section, exactly the same way as an M15. Very similar straps to the M15. But this mask has one unique feature which I'll show you in just a second. So let me get this on. It's a bit dusty unfortunately because of how I've stored it, but it will do its job. So let's get the straps on. Okay, so that's our tight. Now the unique feature of this mask is the filter intake can be twisted. So it works if you're left-handed, right-handed, or you want a filter or a hose underneath. And as far as I'm aware, there's only been a couple of masks throughout history that have done that. Supposedly the reason this mask was discontinued was they had a few problems with it, with valves and things. There's no drinking tube on this one, but some of them had drinking tubes that had faults apparently. And apparently the mask was, you know, very expensive to produce and everything like that. Oh, this has fallen out. Maybe that's why they had the problems with them. Let me have a look. Yep, the bit that fell out just there was the valve to stop air coming backwards out into the filter intake. If you had a filter in there, that couldn't fall out because it'd be wedged in place, but obviously the glue in that bit is wearing out. I could always re-glue that. But yeah, as saying, these were withdrawn from service because they had a couple of faults and they were probably just too expensive for them to make on a big scale. So what you ended up having, you know, done was Avon just cut them a good deal on something like FM12s, and they took the bait on those. But in theory, when this mask was new, most of them didn't really have issues, and they are quite cool masks, especially with that filter twisting thing. I think they're cool even if you don't want it as a functional gas mask, you know, just as a kind of really cool looking mask. Yeah, not loads to say about it that I can't, you know, don't want to get sidetracked in this video on. But yeah, it's an interesting mask. Shame they didn't stick around for longer and have improved versions made, but that's what it is. This one will come as no surprise to people. It's an S10. I've already put the CT12 on the other list, but I'll be cheeky and put the S10 on. The original mask that inspired it. This one with nice sort of cherry red outserts on it. And the S10 was, you know, the British standard issue respirator for quite a long time. Some point in the 80s it was adopted, made by Avon Rubber as usual. And then it wasn't until sort of a few years ago that they switched to the much inferior, in my opinion, Scott GSR. But what does this mask do? It's nice and simple, basically just does the job it needs to do. Has a drinking tube inside. On this one I've actually cut it to length now, so it's not a bad drinking tube. It's fairly comfortable, takes 40mm filters. It doesn't have a voice diaphragm as such, but it has what's called a voice trumpet, where underneath this cover, I'll just take it off so you can see, they have an amplification device where the exhale valve goes into a kind of trumpet bit that amplifies your voice, and then obviously that means you can be heard a bit better than not having an actual proper speech diaphragm. So put the mask on, and I said I'm just going to do the pull down method of putting it on rather than loosening the straps and putting it on the other way. Both are valid, both make an airtight seal. So there we go, everything's gone very red. But yeah, a really great mask, especially when these were introduced in the 1980s. If you think when this mask was introduced, for how modular and updated it was, Russia had nothing like this. When Russia tried to make more advanced masks, like the PMK, it didn't really go so well. And America was still using the M17, so that's clearly better than both of those. France was still on the M51 respirator. Germany was still on the M65 for quite a while. That's a good mask, but you know, has a couple of faults. It wasn't until sort of much later on they modernised that. So it was better than most other countries in the world really at that stage. You know, Avon made a really sort of modern mask for Britain in the 80s that still holds up against a lot of other masks today. So big thumbs up for the S10. Yes, I know I always blow the trumpet of Avon rubber, but you know, it's a shame that Britain decided that they'd say, you know, screw our own industry, let's buy an American mask because we are probably bribed to do it. So Avon rubber made masks for Britain from somewhere, I think around World War I, at least, you know, before World War II. In the interwar years they made lots of civilian respirators and lots of the military respirators, and then sadly, you know, they made good respirator after respirator for the army and civilians, and then the government eventually said, you know, it's not politically convenient for us to keep buying your masks. But the silver lining of that was then the US put a big order in for Avon M50, so then the US buy, you know, a good British mask, so there you go. And last but not least, the Forsheda F2 A4, also known as the Skyd Mask 90, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's basically just gas mask 90 in Sweden. Basically, what Sweden did in the 1990s was they decided they were going to update their respirators, because they'd been using a copy of the American M9 called the M51, I think it was, for quite a while. And again, M9 was a very good mask for when it came out, but probably a bit outdated, you know, by the 1990s for an actual proper army to be using. So what they did, and it's quite clear from looking at the previous mask, they basically said, we want something, you know, quite a lot like the S10. So it's kind of like a backwards engineered S10, I guess you could say. So you can see why I like this mask already. I like it for the same reason I like all the Avon masks. It was a really good face piece when it came out. So there's two different versions made, the Forsheda F2 and the F2 A4. The F2 was the military version that had a drinking tube, and you could put the filter on both sides. On this one you can only do it on one, because this is the A4. So on the civilian A4, filter would only go on one side and there's no drinking tube. Other than that, they're exactly the same. Both are very good masks. Obviously, most people would prefer the F2 because it has a drinking tube on. I'm not fussed on drinking tubes really, so it wouldn't matter. I just say get a good one in good condition cheap. So you know, I like it for the exact same reasons I like the S10, but it has a really nice, comfortable sort of head strap stuff. So let me just get those tightened. Okay, so there we go, that's pretty much done up. This strap's being a bit annoying at the moment because it doesn't seem to want to tighten up past a certain point. It wouldn't do, but it doesn't seem to really want to tighten as much as I want it to tighten. But the F2 A4 is basically, you know, like I was saying, Sweden's S10. You've got very good field of view, very comfortable rubber. This makes the best seal on my face out of any of the gas masks I own. Once the straps are tight enough, it's kind of suction cupped on. So when I take the mask off, it's actually going to kind of do that thing as it uncomes, you know, like a suction cup does on the window, which is great. But yeah, it's good for the same reason the S10 is good, but it's like an improved S10. So this is another mask, a bit like how the FM12 improved upon the S10. This is kind of like another, you know, slightly better S10. So there you go. That's my list of sort of current favourite gas masks. As I said, there's the ShMS is definitely on this list. I just didn't want to, you know, spend a couple of minutes talking about it again, seeing as I've only just done that the other day. And there's a few other masks like the Canadian C3 that I really like as well, and I was sort of on the fence about putting them on the list, but I didn't in the end. So I hope you enjoyed it, but this is, you know, more of my favourite gas masks.